Hi, everyone. So my presentation is going to be a lot more simple than a creation myth. However, I've got visions of Etruria, iconography, and the symbols of Etruscan polytheism. For if it wasn't already obvious, I am an Etruscan polytheist, and I've been looking pretty extensively into Etruscan iconography and symbols, possibly trying to find a symbol for modern Etruscan polytheism. And not only that, to see if I could find any similarities with deities abroad. So, anyways, let us begin. The importance of iconography. As I very poetically said on the PowerPoint, iconography speaks to where words do not. Sometimes divine figures can only be identified through their symbols, myths, poses, or even just a signature weapon in art. And much of the iconography of the Azer was adopted from Greco-Roman counterparts. However, they frequently went through the process of interpreto Etrusca, and I have a great example of that later. And it tells us a lot about what the Etruscans thought and believed if we look into like why did they adopt those certain symbols and why did they choose not to adopt other ones? Or what symbols did just two both deities just happen to have at the same time? And then for us polytheists, as pagans, we can find our own interpretations of identifying the Etruscan gods beyond. For example, one that was suggested in academic text because the Etruscan alphabet became the Norse runes was that Tins would have 100% had to be identified with Thor. They're both fertility gods. They're both portrayed as pretty young, and they are both very like. And there's confliction on who exactly the supreme god of the Etruscan pantheon is. If you go based off comparative mythology, primary sources state that Voltima is the primary deity. So, well, the Deus Princeps, as they would say in Latin. So it could shed more light onto us of what that means. So let's begin with my favorite, Etruscan mirrors. And here I've displayed a mirror, a quite famous one of Turin, Tunis, and behind Turin is Zipna, and around her is a group of Lhasa, her followers. And Etruscan mirrors are frequently engraved with images of cultural and mythological scenes. Now, the most prominent part that I will tell you every scholarly article has made a comment on was the gender fluidity of the Etruscan gods. One of the more fascinating aspects of Etruscan religion is the gender fluidity and diversity of the Azer. And this doesn't just extend to them literally appearing as whatever gendered form. It also applies to their names. Tinia, or Tins, despite nearly always being, at least what we know, always being depicted in masculine, his name is feminine. While theonyms such as Laren and Turin are gender neutral. And this is applied much across the Etruscan religion. And then many other names have no gender declension that we know of, such as Lur or Thalina. Azer with direct Greek-Roman equivalents tend to be portrayed with certain gender expression. However, this is not always the case, as Artemis, the Etruscan imports of Artemis from the Greek realm, appears as a man with Apollo on a mirror. Many deities are also consistently portrayed with significant gender fluidity, such as Thalina. Thalina appears in multiple contexts as both a masculine and a feminine figure. And it has been attested that this gender fluidity reinforced Etruscan harmony in the society and served an apatripatic function to preserve the family and societal structure, which is a very large contrast from modern society, which I find very fascinating as someone with a little bit of a gender funk myself. And then the Etruscan mirrors, and this is just a basic introduction of what they are. They're chief evidence for mythological scenes, many of which we possess are actually from Etruscan tombs, usually at the graves of aristocratic women. And yeah, at these graves, we usually find images of scenes that were thought to appeal to women, or scenes gifted by what was thought to be by their possibly brothers or wives or husbands, such as scenes of valor or otherwise just images that just I think personally just looked cool. Not everything has to have meaning. And upon these mirrors is, as they are our chief artistic representation, is lightning. Beyond Tins, our main lightning god, many of the Azer are able to throw lightning. Lightning not only appears as waves on Etruscan mirrors, but also stylistically appears as flora and vegetative characteristics. This artistic rendition, for example, the first image of lightning being held by hand is actually on a mirror of Minerva, which I think personally lends to more suggesting that lightning possesses a more fertility or just simply lightning as an aspect of nature. And lightning can be portrayed for everything from floral to vegetative to winged, even, or even as a spear, especially with Minerva. Secondly, another interesting fact of the Etruscan religion, going along with their gender fluidity, is the plurality of the Aesir. Many of the Aesir appeared as one singular figure, or as a group of that singular figure, such as Vaneth and Charon being multiplied a group of Vaneths and Charons. Terms also appears as a dyad with two different distinct names. Terms Aptia being the messenger of the underworld, and terms of Tins being the messenger of the heavens. Terms is identified with Mercurius and Hermes, and some scholars think that Terms was a natural distinct deity, or there's a natural distinct deity, or just or was imported and then reinterpreted. Personally, I lend more to they truly were a distinct deity in Etruscan religion, as Terms has many aspects that are unfounded in Etruscan religion, particularly that Terms is not a psychopomp. That is the role held by Fluffluns, the god of wine. And then Lassa is not only a term for nymphi-like being, but also is a singular goddess, but also is a group of that singular goddess. It's not confusing at all. The reason for this is not exactly known. I've seen some scholars suggest that this is a remnant. The thought behind Etruscan religion is that it was originally that the gods were very fluid, didn't really have human aspects, and then when they got merged with Greco-Roman gods, they took on a lot of those aspects. Or this is just simply how the Aesir are. Who knows? And I also do find it quite fascinating the fact that a deity can essentially multiply themselves, and this is especially seen on tomb art, but that's probably likely due to the fact that tomb art is the art that one along with mirrors that survives most, because when you're in an enclosed room, things tend to last a lot longer. Then divine nudity. What a fun subject. Divine nudity is frequent in Etruscan art. Unlike Greek art, however, nudity occurs equally in both masculine and feminine figures. In Greek art, nudity for men, at least if we're talking about the classical era, is a symbol of valor, while for women it was that of shame, unless it was for a goddess. Even then, not exactly as common as it is for Etruscan art, because I tell you, most of the art, they're all nude. It's great. Etruscan art also frequently shows motherly scenes and breastfeeding/nursing, which is a big contrast to at least certain eras of Greco-Roman art, as this is quite frankly celebrated, where that isn't depicted as much. While it does occur, it isn't depicted as much as other cultures. Since its frequency in art, nudity is taken as a common attribute of Aesir, whether they're masculine or feminine forms. Nudity has also been interpreted as a symbol of divinity. It's also been interpreted as a symbol of the dead, as dead figures in the Etruscans were, well, nude. And to that comment, yes, the Etruscans were more gender egalitarian. In fact, Etruscan women could own land and they could divorce their husbands, while Etruria is still, I will have to say now, Etruria is still a patriarchal society. It was a lot better than the rest of the ancient world, especially compared to Rome. That's kind of a low bar. And then tomb art. I decided to keep this section rather short because tomb art is a book within itself. Tomb art is famous and well preserved. It portrays both the daily lives, the afterlife, and the gods, especially the ones of the underworld, who guide the dead along their terrifying journey to eternal rest. Tomb art, as I previously stated, is best preserved in Etruria with detailed mythological cultural scenes. Scenes depict feasting, which can either be while it is a feature of Etruscan society, one of the destinations, since there's multiple destinations in the afterworld, particularly the underworld, is that of the eternal feast of one's ancestors. And then other tombs depict the scenes to the afterworld, which the journey we don't exactly know, because Etruscan religion, for those who don't know, is actually a religion of scripture. There was a book of scripture. All of it is lost, nearly all of it, which is great for me. and and so we can find a lot of symbols within the tombs, such as the sea serpent, while a symbol of Netherlands in the not underworld, is also a part of the journey to the afterworld. You begin. The basic journey is that you begin at the door, then you are let in. Then Vaneth and Charon will take you on their journey, and during this journey, there will be things trying to kill your immortal soul, and it's basically mission survive. And you go across an undetermined amount of land, and you have to cross a sea and then get to the afterworld with Atia. And Atia is one of the rulers of the underworld. There's one other attested. The exact relationship between the two is not known. Dancing is also depicted on Etruscan art. However, the only Azer known to dance is Sethlans, as it is commented that dancing is not a trait of the Etruscan gods except for Sethlans, and that is one of the reasons why he stands out as an outcast in the pantheon. Which I do find quite fascinating, because Sethlans was identified with Hephaestus, and he absorbed, and one of his depictions says where he absorbed the myth of Hephaestus being carried back to, well, not Olympus because it's Etruria, but something similar. And on the way, Sethlans dances up all the way up back to the heavens. And then common on these tombs are images of protector deities such as Vaneth, which makes sense. One of the more famous tombs is that where the entrance up to the tomb has Vaneth and Charon on both sides of the door, ready to whether that means they're ready to let the dead in or they're just overlooking as a departure scene, we don't know. Etruria is great, as they write, and like another contrast to tomb art is that the Etruscans literally wrote things down. That is a great contrast to the ancient world. They believed deeply in writing things down. They had their own scripture and they had their own books. However, that doesn't really survive. But on these tombs, we can discover those mythological scenes and seeing how they got reinterpreted. And then sculpture. This aspect of Etruscan religion it's understood, but it's also not. Etruscan artists were known for the ability for bronze metallurgy, especially under Sethlans and Etruria's vast resources in the ancient world. And many of these well-made sculptures are invaluable, precious, and still existing today. I'll bet many of them are fractured. I just wanted to point out some two ones of the Etruscan gods. For one, we have the Chatasella Venus, which is quite funny. They call it a Venus because this is likely a depiction of Turin. This was discovered at a necropolis, and likely, as my side said, depicts Turin, who was identified with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. This Koro-style statue was likely modified for just a male Koro statue to a feminine one, essentially going under gender reassignment, which I would take this as one. Wow, they had to discover how to craft feminine figures, I suppose, from Greece. Secondly, that perhaps this just suggests a certain gender fluidity to Turin herself, as this is quite literally be a trans statue in a way. And then secondly is the Mars of Todi. This is a rather unique sculpture. For one, it's beautiful and most of it is preserved. Look at the detail. Secondly, this is a Etruscan Umbrian statue, thought to either depict a worshipper or Laran himself, the god of war, who is identified with Mars and Ares. The armor here is a highly detailed set of Etruscan armor with the figure in a standard position of worship. He may have held a spear or a libation cup. The inscription reads, Ahal Turantes gave this as a gift, which would likely suggest that this is either Lauren or was given to Lauren. Other Etruscan symbols. The double-headed axe is connected to underworld and sacrifice, which I imagine you Gaulish polytheists would love. Snakes, wolves, and vultures are symbols of the underworld, as they appear in common iconography for underworld gods and death demons, or even werewolves. Yay! Secondly, wings are common motifs of the divine, seers, and the dead. The Azer are commonly depicted with or without them. Souls of the dead are often shown with swans. And Chalkis, a Greek seer who was sort of, I suppose, imported mythologically to Etruria, is shown having wings while doing haruspicy. Then another symbol, the sea serpent, appears in Etruscan art as a helper to the afterworld and connected Netherlands. Conversely, the griffin, while not stated here, also appears on Etruscan tombs. And then eyes. Eyes. I love eyes. Eyes are a complex motif in Etruria, ranging from protective to deadly, or simply as decoration depending on the source interpretation. The Gorgon was imported to Etruria. For exact context, we don't know. That's going to be my answer a lot here. Attributes of some of the Aesir. And yes, for that comment, the description is Umbrian. Tinia in Uni. Tinia, or Tins, as I often call him, is often depicted in a manner similar to Zeus, as a mature man with a beard, or a young man with either short or long hair. His lightning bolts are either floral, wavy lines, or the standard lightning symbol, like quite literally the emoji. However, he also appears with dynastic energy, applying a connection to viticulture or possibly even revelry. Uni appears in two capacities: as a motherly aristocratic figure, or as a war goddess wearing a lance and a goat skin. As I'll just put this out here now, Turin was not identified with Astarte. Turin has nothing to do with war. It is rather Uni who is identified with Astarte and Astarte/Ishtar. So I know someone suggested that there was a connection to Ishtar for Turin. No, that is actually Uni. She also may appear nude. Like that, the Etruscan gods are kind of nudists. And then Hercule, Heracles, and Minerva. Hercule is depicted in very similar fashion to his Greco-Roman depiction, holding a club and wearing animal's pelt. In archaic Etruscan art, his appearance is strongly influenced by representations of the Melicart figure. Well, figures, depending on which source you're going through, which is another Phoenician god. And he once again also appears nude. Meanwhile, Minerva is depicted as a young woman with or without wings. She uses a lance, sometimes a vegetable lightning bolt, and wears the scaled aegis with a gorgon's head over her long robes. Unlike many of the Aesir, she is nearly always depicted clothed. So she is not a nudist. And yes, she was depicted with a goat skin. For Uni, she had a goat skin. Lauren and Lur. Lauren is depicted in a similar manner to other Mediterranean war gods, either appearing as a young man or an older bearded man with either a spear, lance, or sword and dressed in armor. He also may wear a cloak or, once again, be nude. Even if nude, he still usually holds a weapon. Lur, a member of Lauren's circle, is likewise depicted as a young man with a sword and a cloak. Lauren's attributes are often the standard for a god of war in Etruria, as Voltima, the supreme deity, according to primary sources, is depicted with a spear and a cloak. In his capacity as a war god. And for those who are unfamiliar, Voltima is, I suppose, original wouldn't exactly be the 100% the right word, but Vertimus was imported from Etruria, and he was Voltima. Then Turin and her circle. Turin is typically depicted as a nude, semi-nude, or fully clothed aristocratic woman in Etruscan art. She has some fine jewelry and a crown, especially in scenes in which her circle, such attendants, dress her. Her attendants are typically shown winged or wingless, with many, such as Thalena, Evan, etc., possessing a fluid gender. Turin's giant swan, Tusna, also appears with Turin. That's her little buddy. And then Cluselans and Cephalans. Cluselans in a bronze votive is shown to be a beard, dual-faced Aesir, likely identified with Ionis, appearing as all nude except for shoes, necklace, and a priestly cap. He's associated with keys in the Hellenistic Buddha statue, and he may have held a key or a ritual staff. Another terracotta sculpture from Bulci depicts him as bearded, very similar to Ionis. Cephalans is depicted as a young man with boots and a bear's cloak. This contrasts to the older Sylvanus, who is thought to be his equivalent counterpart, whatever their relationship is. And then we have Atia in the underworld. Atia, a ruler of the underworld. In cult, though he is called Kalu, is unique in that he is both wolf and man. He's depicted with the cap of a wolf's head and eyes over his own head. Like most chthonic Etruscan deities, he is sometimes depicted with serpents. Vanith, Vanith, a guide in the afterlife, is depicted as a young woman with or without wings, often bare chested with a cross girdle. She is usually bearing a torch. Meanwhile, her companion, Taran, is shown to be a blue-skinned man with a bird-like face, a tunic, and a hammer. He also may bear a torch. And in some art, he is shown as wielding that hammer with a deadly force. Unknown death demons, quotation marks around that, are usually shown as winged youths, though some appear as swans and others as werewolves. Yay. And then the final part of my presentation, from Etruria and into Gaul. And for the previous section, there are many, many Azer, which is why I confined it to some of the more main ones. However, you can probably look it up yourself if you want to expand more of what they look like. Gallo-Etruscan trade. The Etruscans were people who traded and sold many goods, especially art, pottery, and wine. In fact, the Etruscans in Greek mythology are often shown as being pirates, such as the one fresco of Dionysus being attacked by the Tuscan pirates that were turned into dolphins. The Viax grave in Gaul, for example, has Etruscan jugs and a bronze tripod. Butchero pottery was especially popular, chiefly in the cities, at least attested, in the cities of Marseilles and Saint Blaise. Excuse my French. Uni, our beloved goddess of war, is attested in Marseilles as a deity who received cultic worship from inscription. She was likely imported via trade. The exact nature of her worship is not known, whether that was simply a sailor who left an artifact there, or if it was dedicated by a Gaul, by a Gaulish person, or just somehow ended up there. It is unknown. However, she is attested there, which is great. And then that very big word that I cannot pronounce, anaphora. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. The first one are Etruscan wine jugs that are imported into Gaul from Etruria, sometimes appearing in Gaulish burial mounds. These are jugs that were used to pour wine. Most are believed to have manufactured at Ulci on the Tyrrhenian coast of central Italy. These were especially popular in the Rhineland, which near Uni is attested. Etruscan wine jugs appear across Gaulish cultures from modern-day France to Austria. We can assume, considering Uni's importation to Gaul, that Etruscan Gauls may have been imported into Gaul, especially along the Rhine and in Saint Blaise and Marseille. What this possibly means is that we could probably find equivalents, or UPG, I suppose, of which Azer are equivalent to Gaulish gods. However, beyond Uni, attested, by the way, does not have a secondary name, so we don't know if she was synchronized or not, is simply there. And then that's sort of the end. And the Etruscans watered down their wine. That's a great question. We don't know. However, the Etruscans are attested putting spices and grating cheese into their wine. So is Flufflent a cheese god? I'll have to go ask him.